Welcome back for part 6 of the David Crawford serial arson case on Crime to Burn. In parts 1 through 5, we've discussed the names on the list in Crawford's phone. There were 11 names on the list. We've talked about the 2 targets on the list that haven't yet had a fire, Mark Kratzer and Josh Gates. We talked about Martin, the former colleague of Crawford's that had 2 vehicles set aflame in his driveway. We've talked about Bud Price, a former superior officer of Crawford's that had his garage lit on fire. We've talked about Scott, Crawford's nephew, that had his pool set on fire the night before his daughter's graduation party. We talked about Justin Sherstrom, Crawford's stepson, that had 3 separate fires at his home, allegedly at Crawford's hands. We talked about Richard McLaughlin, who replaced Crawford as police chief and had his garage and cars set on fire. We talked about the woman that Crawford's wife had a disagreement with over the term white privilege, who found her mother's car on fire in her driveway. That leaves us 3 more entries on the list: Hawkins, Cairo, and Evelyn 2. Today, we'll cover 2 more fires. Up till now, all of Crawford's fires have resulted in property damage only. However, today we're going to get to the first of 2 fires in which Crawford was charged with attempted murder. In addition, we'll get into some new information that came to light this week, right now on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer and former firefighter.
And I'm indescribable.
All right, before we get started, I have to give a huge thank you to Scott and Ryan over at the Beyond the Shadows podcast. I sent them a story to use for their fire pit, which is a little segment they do at the end of each episode, and they used my story, but they also said some super, super nice things about Crime to Burn, and so we thank you very much. And if you haven't listened to Beyond the Shadows yet, go check them out. They're definitely a top shelf podcast, and they are in my weekly rotation. I look forward to listening every week. And sometimes I have to be careful when I listen because I occasionally wake up my husband laughing at some of their funnier episodes. Some episodes are more serious, but whether they're laughing it up or telling a difficult case, their show really is great, and I think everyone should listen to it. Then a reminder that we would greatly appreciate your 5-star review on whatever platform you use to listen. That is the absolute most helpful thing you can do for any podcast that you love. If you have constructive feedback, we'd love for you to reach out to us at crimetoburn@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram, X, and Facebook. And don't forget, you can follow us on YouTube. I put regular shorts on YouTube in addition to Instagram, plus our episodes are available on YouTube. And anywhere you follow us, it is greatly appreciated if you'd be so kind as to leave us a like, make a comment, or share the content that you see from us. It goes a really long way in helping us reach a wider audience. And finally, Spotify has a new feature where you can actually leave comments on individual episodes, and you're welcome to do that, but I just want to make sure everyone understands that if you comment on an episode, I don't have a method to respond to your comments through Spotify, so feel free to also use any of our social media accounts or email if you leave a comment that you would like me to respond to. Once again, it's been a very busy week talking to people that knew Crawford, but so far we have no clarification on what Josh Gates, the host of the Discovery show Expedition Unknown, may have done to piss off David Crawford. And this is continuing to be a constant source of irritation for me, so please, someone out there has a theory or knows, please email me at crimetoburn@gmail.com. You can stay anonymous. I'm dying to know. Secondly, last week we discussed a lot of the harassment that Carrie endured, which included spray-painted messages, and in some of the communications that were left behind, things were misspelled, and we surmised that they were possibly intentionally misspelled to throw off investigators. And then I mentioned that I had not been able to corroborate that there was also a spray-painted message left at one of the fires Crawford is accused of in Montgomery County. I have now been able to corroborate this information. It's been confirmed that in one of the fires that occurred at Justin and Miriam Sherstrom's home, there was a spray-painted message left behind. And I don't know exactly what the message said, but it was threatening in nature, and it actually named the next-door neighbor of Justin and Miriam. Only the graffiti artist spelled the neighbor's name incorrectly. This led investigators to believe that the first arson at Justin's home was actually a case of the wrong address and that the target had actually been the next-door neighbor. However, Justin and Miriam then had 2 additional fires, and those fires include video of the suspect approaching and leaving. They have the exact same MO as the first fire, and there are definite similarities to say with relative confidence that all 3 fires were likely the same arsonist.
This guy had one job.
Spray painting a threatening message and setting a fire?
And he got the wrong address?
That's what I'm saying, is they think that it was to throw investigators off.
So that's how smart this guy thinks he is. He keeps doing things like suggesting he's a whole gang.
Yep.
And this is what he does.
Allegedly, because he hasn't been charged in that. But yeah.
Allegedly gaslights imaginary people.
Mm-hmm.
He's allegedly an asshole.
In the first fire where the spray-painted message was left, we know that the arsonist approached the home, dumped out a liquid, used a lighter to light the fire, and left. And the second fire, the arsonist basically does exactly the same thing. Only this time, we actually get a glimpse of the arsonist leaving the scene, and the clothing that he was wearing included, the hooded sweatshirt that was pulled tight around his face. And we see a car in that video. And then in the third fire, that's where we see even more of the arsonist, and we were able to identify that the arsonist has Dave's swagger and fashion sense.
Oh, can I pick up his drip?
I don't even know what that means.
I don't either.
Okay.
I heard a kid say it.
So he had an unusual gait, and multiple people matched that and said it looked like the way that they knew Dave to walk. He also has the same MO, pouring gasoline on the garage door, lighting the garage on fire. So it's not a huge leap to say that all 3 fires were probably the same arsonist. And if he left graffiti at the first fire with a misspelled name to throw off police, as we are theorizing here, then when we look back at the harassment Carrie was enduring with graffiti and misspelled names, well, that makes me wonder if this doesn't perhaps make it a more likely situation that Crawford's the perpetrator in the harassment of Carrie. Now again, he's not charged in those cases. He's only listed as an official suspect in one of the police reports that I'm in possession of. But to me, this seems like a really strong coincidence. And I think that you'll find most investigators don't usually trust coincidences much. So I'm not suggesting that this is enough to charge Crawford or to say that he's definitely guilty, but to me it increases the suspicion that he might be responsible for the harassment that included all that spray painting.
Alright, so I've heard about this guy's infamous gait several times by now, the way he walks. What is he, like a pimp named Slickback? Does he not touch the ground when his feet go down? Like, what's he doing that's so unique? Have you seen videos of this guy walking around?
Yes.
How interesting would that be?
Didn't you say you watched the video? Didn't you tell me you watched the video?
I watched a video of a person that was unidentifiable that was pouring gasoline on the garage.
I don't know how to describe the gait other than to show you what it is. But
Does he have like a pimp cane? Does he have
sort of
goldfish in his shoes? What's happening?
Sort of like...
You're waddling.
Yeah, he sort of waddles.
Like the penguin?
Not quite like a penguin, but he definitely seems to favor one side when he walks.
Well, I got a limp, so I don't got no hate for that. But I just keep hearing about it. It just keeps coming up. His gait. He has a distinctive gait. Where's this guy limping over? What's happening?
Well, we're going to talk today about the reasons that he was seeing a chiropractor, so...
Oh.
Maybe that'll reveal some more. The truth is, the prosecution never explains to us why he has a distinctive gait. I'm not suggesting Crawford is guilty in the harassment of Carrie, but I do think that the fact that there was a spray-painted message left on one of the fires that we suspect Crawford has sort of increases my suspicion that he is related to that case. Possibly. More suspicious than I was.
You think you read Emerson?
I don't know.
Well, Emerson said, consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds.
Okay, and more than one person has now reported the same rumor to me, and again, this is just a rumor. I have heard that it's possible that somebody in Anne Arundel County actively dissuaded investigators from fully pursuing the criminal investigation into Carrie's harassment. In all the cases where it was presented to me as some people have suggested, or I was told, and then as I've heard from people that would know, and not, I know this to be the case. So while I've heard it from different sources, it's all hearsay. But I'm bringing it up because if you are in a position to know whether or not investigators in Anne Arundel County were dissuaded from fully investigating Carrie's harassment, crimetoburn@gmail.com. You can be anonymous. You don't even have to write it in the email. You can just give me a phone number and I'll call you. I'm just doing my best to try to corroborate rumors where I can. Or if you have proof that that's not the case, crimetoburn@gmail.com. All right, so one last bit of new information that I've received is actually really interesting, but I'm going to have to leave you hanging on it a little bit. But I need to bring it up because more people may have information that want to talk about it. But last week, I asked the question of whether or not there might be any other unsolved arsons that police couldn't tie Crawford to, but maybe suspected that he was involved with. Well, there have now been people that have theorized that there are some other arsons that Crawford may be connected to. So I began researching these incidents, and I talked to one person who told me the information they gave me basically led me to believe that there's nothing to show that there might be a connection. But then I talked to another person who had access to this information from a different angle, and they gave me some information that once again is a really strong coincidence and makes me ask questions more. And I have some conversations scheduled to talk to some other people that may have knowledge of these incidents. But if you know of any fires in the Laurel area that happened maybe between 2012 and 2014 that you think Crawford may have been involved with, and you would like to share what your theories are, crimetoburn@gmail.com. I would love to talk to you. Again, I don't have any proof. At this point, it's just rumors that I'm researching. So I'm not presenting this as he was involved. There was other fires that happened during the time that Crawford happened. Somebody gave me some information that they think makes it suspicious, and that's all it is. So don't take that as an accusation or that I'm suggesting that he definitely is involved. It's just something that needs more time to ferret out. And since so many of you have contacted me as a result of these recordings, I decided to solicit additional information from any of you out there that might have it.
Just tell him not to kill the messenger and let's move on.
Now, in discussing this case, we've talked about Anne Arundel County, where the harassment of Carrie and her mother and stepfather occurred. We've discussed Prince George's County, where Marty Fleming and Rich McLaughlin both had fires. We've discussed Howard County, where Mrs. Byrne allegedly had a fire over the phrase white privilege. We've discussed 3 Montgomery County fires at Justin and Miriam Sherstrom's homes. We've discussed the fire at Bud Price's house, which was in Frederick County. Recall that while he was charged in the Frederick County case, Crawford took an Alford plea, which is not an admission of guilt.
An Alfred plea?
Yes, an Alford plea. Alford plea. Did I say Alfred?
I don't know. It sounded
Alford.
like Batman's butler.
All right.
Don't go out at night as a vigilante, Master Bruce.
In the Bud Price case, he took an Alford plea, which is not an admission of guilt. It only acknowledges that the case against the suspect appears to be rather strong and likely to secure a conviction, and so it allows the defendant to take a plea deal without admitting guilt. So he can't be called guilty.
It's like a no contest plea.
Yeah, kind of like a no contest plea.
Nolo contende.
But he's not been charged either in Montgomery County or PG County to my knowledge. But today we're going to head to a fresh new county in Maryland.
They just made it?
No.
So it's stale.
We're going to Charles County.
Very stale.
Home of Alfonso Hawkins Jr.
I don't know if he's stale or not.
Well, this case is a little bit unusual. While the MO matches Crawford's other fires and the name Hawkins does appear on Crawford's list, Alfonso Hawkins Jr. never knew Crawford, never met him, and Crawford reportedly didn't know him either. However, Crawford did know Alfonso Hawkins Jr.'s dad, Alfonso Hawkins Sr.
Why does that name sound so cool? My name is Alfonso Hawkins Jr. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Well, Alfonso Hawkins Sr. and Crawford had worked together at the Prince George's County Police Department. So there's 2 possibilities here. Either Crawford knew Hawkins Sr. had a son and intentionally targeted the son, or more likely, in what the prosecution alleges, that he did not know Alfonso Hawkins Sr. had a son at all and assumed when he found Alfonso Hawkins it was the same Alfonso Hawkins and he just got the wrong guy.
The baby is yours.
Alfonso William Hawkins Sr. was with the Prince George's County Police Department from 1976 until 1997.
Oh, shit. I had a whole life during that.
In his time with the PGPD. He served as an interim chief at one point, a deputy chief, a colonel, and he testified in the trial that he could not recall any specific negative interactions with Crawford. He said what he remembers of Crawford was that Crawford was a loner and he was relatively low-key. He didn't see Crawford hanging out much with the other guys, but he did testify that Crawford did play on a softball league that he played in at one point. But Hawkins was superior to Crawford in the police force. He said that he couldn't recall if he'd ever been a direct supervisor of Crawford's, but we know that Crawford has targeted other Prince George's County police officers that were in positions superior to him. So it makes me wonder if Crawford may have had a negative interaction, but it was so trivial to Hawkins that he just can't remember it. I'm not suggesting that's true. I'm just wondering.
Isn't that crazy how based on perspective you could be always punching down even though it's not true?
But there's also another possibility here, and this is a little touchy, but because it did seem like the prosecution was sort of trying to edge some of the evidence to point in that direction, I feel like I need to address it. But I want to be careful here because I don't want to paint Crawford more prejudicially than he's already painted himself. But Alfonso Hawkins is black. I heard several things in the testimony that made it seem like the prosecution was trying to suggest that David Crawford was racist. Those things include the issues that he and Mary reportedly had with Miriam being Persian, the issue they took with Justin's son attending a daycare run by a Persian woman or a Muslim woman. Justin also testified that his stepdad found rap music, quote, offensive, unquote.
What?
And in fairness, we could say that maybe he just didn't like Miriam because she offended him over that diaper changing incident. Maybe he just really does find rap music exceptionally annoying. We could say that maybe he and Mary thought their grandson should attend a different type of daycare instead of an in-home daycare, like maybe one of those corporate daycares with lots of teachers and preschools and I don't know.
Or one that's ran by a really flowery cult that has great snacks.
It could be a lot of things. But I have enough contacts now that I use this opportunity to ask people that worked with him and knew him outside of work if they thought that he was racist. Now, I was specifically looking to see if anyone that had known him professionally thought he was racist at first. Now, one person said that they honestly had no idea, that they had not had the kind of interactions with him that would have revealed his any racist tendencies one way or another. Another person said that he believed he probably was racist, but everything that he witnessed was not outright and blatantly racist, and you could potentially construe it as maybe he just didn't like the person they were talking about. But he said if he had to bet, he would have bet there was some racism there, but nothing blatant and obvious. And this person gave me specific examples, which I can't give you because they'll give away the person who it is. It convinced me that there's a question there, at least professionally, for people that know professionally. There's a question of whether or not he might be racist. Professionally, one person I talked to said they had no idea one way or another. Another person said that they suspected that he was racist, but he was never blatant and obvious with it. It was always sort of a little bit of an undercurrent there.
He didn't have a swastika on his chest?
No, not that anyone knew of. Then I reached out to people that knew Crawford in a more personal capacity and not through work. And the resounding response I got from those people were that both he and Mary were racist. The discussion from my sources, and this is from more than one source, is that they had made it known that their issue with the daycare situation was they didn't want their grandson to be taken care of by a Muslim. And it was also reported to me that they had said and done things to indicate that their racial distaste was not isolated to those of only Middle Eastern or Muslim persuasion. He equally disliked anyone that was not white. Now, it was also suggested by these people that Mary was very much of the opinion that white and Catholic was the only correct way to exist, and Crawford did convert to Catholicism for Mary. However, somebody suggested to me that he may have actually been Catholic, converted to Baptist because of a previous relationship, and then converted back to Catholicism, and so that maybe he did convert back for Mary, and even though he wasn't active in the church, that he shared Mary's views on anyone that's not Catholic being wrong.
You know what Emerson said?
I don't.
This is like a quiz, I already told you.
I can't remember.
Consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds.
I can't know what's in Crawford or his wife's head. I don't want anyone to think that I'm accusing them of being racist. But the trial had undertones suggesting some level of racism, which is why I needed to look into it. Honestly, I think that the evidence is strong enough without bringing racism into it, but because there's not a clear motive in the Hawkins case, I felt like I needed to bring it up as a potential motive. There could have been a disagreement Hawkins doesn't remember, or it could have just been that he didn't like the idea that there was a man of color in a position superior to him. I think both of them are a little weak as far as motive.
Yeah, I don't really want to be polarizing. I don't really accept this whole idea of racism. Like, there are humans, and there are other than humans. Those are different races, maybe. Like, there's an argument to be made for that, but races among humans? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
People that worked with Crawford, in hindsight, are telling me that maybe there was some
ethnical challenges?
Yes, and then people that were personally associated with Crawford felt that they had enough experience with hearing his views to say with confidence that there was some ethnic challenges. And we'll just leave it at that.
He was is what you're saying.
Let's talk about what happened in this particular fire. Alfonso Hawkins Jr. awoke in the early morning hours of March 3rd, 2019 at 3 a.m. because he had to pee. He arose to go relieve himself, and on the way back, he noticed an orange glow outside. So he goes and looks out his window, and he sees that his truck in the driveway is on fire, and he specifically says the bed of his truck was on fire.
Now you see why I pee outside? I would notice immediately, wouldn't I? I got a fire extinguisher, I'd take care of it.
We have fire extinguishers everywhere, I love it. So he woke his girlfriend and their children, called 911, and he had to get everyone out of the house through the back door. Now, I believe this is a townhouse, but I wasn't able to see the pictures they're showing in court because he mentions that he had to go out the back door and go all the way around. So it sounds to me like a townhouse situation. When he got outside, he reports his entire truck is now engulfed in flames, and he's waiting for the fire department to arrive. And apparently, at this point, the fire damaged the parking brake or the transmission or something and caused the truck to slip out of the brake or out of gear or whatever it was in. And it begins to roll down Hawkins' sloped driveway and goes across the street into the neighbor's yard, where it then comes to rest, continuing to burn.
Man, I'm not going to give this guy credit for being able to think of this, but like that sounds like an Angry Birds chain reaction.
Well, I actually think that this may have saved the fire from involving Alfonso's house.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, and we'll go into what kind of damage it had, but... So the fire department shows up, they put out the fire, and the truck is a total loss. And then the siding on Alfonso's house was melted, completely destroyed, and just melted completely away in certain areas. And the garage door was badly burned to the point that it was not salvageable. I think that while this is similar to the burn fire, where the fire involved a vehicle and the fire didn't start under the hood, this one, the bed of the truck was parked closest to the house. So they had backed into their driveway. Yeah. And had the truck not rolled down toward the neighbor's house where it was then not against a structure,
he could have loaded up that door, right?
The fire could have spread to the house instead of just burning the outside of the house and melting off the siding. Yeah. So Alfonso testified that, this was just a nightmare for his family, and that, remember, they had small children in the house, and apparently this has really affected one of the kids, and it just really broke my heart to hear that. So now this may seem a little bit weak because Alfonso Hawkins Sr. can't recall any meat products.
Like beef?
Like beef. Alfonso Hawkins Sr. can't recall any friction with Crawford. And the fire was set at the home of his son and not at his home. But the name Hawkins does appear on this hit list that we find in Crawford's phone, and the electronic forensics expert testified that in July of 2016 and June of 2018, there were several Spokio searches and Facebook searches for Alfonso Hawkins, and the defendant had manipulated the search terms multiple times related to Hawkins over those searches.
You just said beef is equal to friction, which means with enough beef, there's fire. You got some beef parts rubbing against each other. Eventually, that's going to light up and cause a problem.
That's why you got to use lubricant.
That's why you need the lube.
Just ask P. Diddy.
Oh.
I don't want to bring P. Diddy into this. Now, in this case, investigators did not bring in an arson investigation dog, nor did they take samples for analysis. The reason is because the fuel tank had ruptured on the truck, so the scene was completely contaminated with gasoline already. They would not have been able to prove in any way if gasoline came from the truck's fuel tank or from a arsonist that maybe poured it on the truck. However, because they ruled out any competent igniters in the bed of the truck and they determined that that's where the fire started, they did rule the fire incendiary. They also did check for any recalls on the truck that might have caused a fire. This was a Ford Raptor, and there was none. And then they actually had a mechanic come in and testify to talk about fires that he had experienced in this kind of truck, and all of the fires that he talked about that he knew of had occurred in the engine compartment and none that started in the tailgate. Now, Crawford has not been charged in this fire, but it was presented in the Howard County trial to establish the MO and cover all of the names that were on the hit list. So Crawford's involvement in this fire is only alleged at this point. But the theory is that it is possibly related to either racism. That would be just hearsay. We can't prove that. We don't know what's in Crawford's head. Or there may have been an incident between Crawford and Hawkins that nobody can remember because it was so blah to everyone else. But it does appear that Crawford was searching for Hawkins, and he probably just did not know that Hawkins' son had the same name, and he just got the wrong Hawkins. That's what the police allege.
It's Junior, so I think, Junior.
Actually, I said Junior throughout that whole section, but it was clarified in court that he's Alfonso Hawkins II, not Junior.
I think we should clarify that. I have a brother who is also the second, and not a junior. No, to be clear.
Mr. Hawkins, my apologies, should be Alfonso Hawkins II.
With like a Roman numeral?
Yeah.
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 I agree.
Junior does sound a little bit...
It sounds derogative.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah. The second. Alfonso Hawkins II. That brings our tally up to 9 fires, so let's plow ahead to fire number 10. There were 2 entries on the hit list that did not include names. The first name on the list that wasn't an actual name was White Privilege, which we discussed was Erica Byrne. And the other not a name on the target list that was found in Crawford's phone was the word Cairo.
Wait. So if that lady was like, if you were married and you started dating that lady, would she be your sideburn?
The other not a name that was on the target list found in Crawford's phone was Chiro, Chiro. Now, police and prosecutors allege that this entry pertains to a husband and wife chiropractor team that reportedly treated Crawford at some point, and their names are Russell and Veronica Antico. Now, unlike Alfonso Hawkins, prosecutors believed that they did have evidence of some tension in the relationship between Crawford and the Anticos. However, the defense objected to the inclusion of this evidence. So this part that I'm about to tell you, the jury never got to hear. But lucky for you, podcast listener, you get to hear this information. So the state tried to introduce 2 pages of medical records that appears to document a possible billing dispute. So it appears that Mr. Crawford sought the help of the Anticos following an injury for which he had obtained a personal injury attorney. And this file that they tried to introduce indicated that the defendant owed the Anticos $2,140, and the personal injury attorney that Crawford hired wrote them to offer to settle the account with a reduction in fee to $1,400.
Man, that's some typical lawyering.
Well, actually...
Some nickel and dime stuff, it sounds like.
Actually, you're not wrong, and I'll tell you why. Then, the record appears to indicate that a final payment was accepted of $1,712, so it's lower than the original amount, but not as low as the attorney had requested.
What, the plaintiff needed a pack of smokes? What's happening?
Well, I'm going to tell you. I learned, because I didn't know this, from the bench conference I learned, that apparently in personal injury cases like this, it's not unusual for personal injury attorneys to refer clients to specific medical providers that they have relationships with. And then because they're frequently referring people to them, they will negotiate lower fees from those medical providers in order to maximize any settlement. So from the bench conference, I learned from the defense attorney, he explained that this is not an unusual interaction in a medical injury case, and the judge agreed and said this is not uncommon. This is what happens in medical injury cases. So the court ruled that this wasn't adequate evidence of tension. This is just a back and forth about billing that was quite typical for the type of relationship that the attorney had with the medical providers. So he sustained the objection. The evidence was not introduced. As a result, the prosecutor was never able to present any sort of motive for the Antico fires. The Anticos just testified that they had no recollection of any instances of bad feelings or tension between themselves and Crawford. Now, something else really interesting also happened during this same bench conference. It was revealed that when Mark Kratzer showed up in court to present his testimony, claiming that, he talked about the tension in his relationship with David Crawford, and then he viewed the pictures that David Crawford had taken of his home and, told the jury that, no, I didn't give David permission to take these pictures. I didn't ask him to take them. I don't know why he would have shown up and taken pictures. That was basically the extent of his testimony. However, when he showed up and greeted the prosecution, he told them, I have had 2 fires. However, this was the first the prosecution heard of it. They had no idea, so they immediately go and tell the defense attorney because this is something that could be a lack of discovery issue. And they decided, they all agreed together that because they hadn't known about this, that they weren't going to discuss it at all in this case, but it needed to be documented on the court record, because if those fires that are supposedly under investigation ever went to court, and the court subpoenaed the testimony from this case, they could be like, why didn't you talk about him then? Like, were you being dishonest in your testimony? So they brought it up in this bench trial so that it would be on the official court record what happened and why it wasn't included. So I thought that was interesting.
No, that sounds smart to me. That could be a pretty sticky wicket.
Yeah. It seemed to me like the prosecutor was displeased that this was the first they were hearing about it. But if you know anything about the 2 fires that Mark Kratzer apparently did have, crimetoburn@gmail.com. You can be anonymous if you want, but I'd like to talk to you. So moving back to Russell and Veronica Antico, they were Crawford's chiropractors. They lived in Ellicott City, which is in Howard County, so this is one of the 4 fires for which he stood trial and was convicted. And Antico testified again that they didn't have any disagreements they could recall. So in 2017, somewhere between 4 and 4:15 a.m., Russell Antico and his wife awoke smelling smoke, thinking that something was burning downstairs. They go to investigate. They open the door to the garage and said that they couldn't see anything but thick black smoke. So they run to get their 2 children and Veronica's mother, who I believe is living with them, and they get everyone outside. And Russell reported that there was a car parked in front of the garage, which was on fire, and he moves the car away from the garage doors.
Can we talk about black smoke for a minute?
Mm-hmm.
Well, why do you think that they saw thick black smoke? Because I've responded to several fires.
Here's where we learn the difference.
You have responded to more fires than me.
I know. This
Why
is interesting.
would there be black smoke and not gray or white smoke?
Because black smoke forms when you burn hydrocarbons.
Right.
So you did mostly wildlands firefighting.
Very rural.
Very rural. So you would have seen a lot of like grass fires, brush fires,
all
tree
organics.
fires. Yeah. But black smoke occurs when you have hydrocarbons that burn. So plastics, which
I would have been terribly concerned to see black smoke.
Yeah, I would
have
been,
thought that's going to make my weekend suck bad.
Yeah. So black smoke, most house fires have a period of black smoke, and that's usually where
all their textiles go up, right? Curtains and carpet and
plastic, all of the plastic. So that's a great question. Anyway, they move the car away from the house. They get everyone outside. The fire department comes. They extinguish the fire, and it had burned up the front of the garage and into the roof directly above the garage. Now, the prosecution pointed out that the mother-in-law's room was reportedly right above the garage, but the defense later indicated that it actually wasn't directly above the garage. It was above the garage, but offset some. Why does this matter? Well, in this case, Crawford is actually being charged with attempted murder and not just arson. And this is because there was 5 people in the house, and he didn't light a car on fire. He lit the house on fire. He lit the garage doors on fire, according to the prosecution. Now, this investigation into this particular fire is a little bit unusual. because the initial investigator that went to the scene did write a report, but he never finished it. It never went through the official QC process that Howard County uses, so it was never finalized and filed as the final report. Now, this QC process is where investigators take their reports and have them peer-reviewed by an unrelated investigator to ensure that an independent reviewer agrees with the initial investigator's interpretation of all the evidence. So there can be a lot of room for disparity in regards to interpretation of evidence. I've been putting a lot of videos out on our YouTube and Instagram channels about arson investigation myths that have been debunked, which shows just how much junk science was at one point accepted as fact in arson investigation in the past. And I'm happy to report that there's been a lot of effort to debunk these old myths, but that doesn't mean that every investigator is going to interpret the evidence the same way, which is why these peer review processes are so important. So they're looking to ensure that the investigator used the scientific method to identify the possible points of ignition and then included or excluded those based on the procedures that are outlined in NFPA 921, which is a guide for how to perform fire investigation. If an investigator goes into a scene with a preconceived notion of what started the fire, their analysis of the evidence is likely to be skewed by their theory. So their bias may make them interpret evidence in a way that supports their theory. And it appears that this is what initially happened with the first investigation report. The initial investigation surmised that the fire was accidental and it was caused either by a garage door motor or a power outlet in the garage. But again, this report was never peer-reviewed or officially filed. So a supervisor pulls in a different investigator to review the case in 2020. This was 3 years after the fire. Why would they suddenly become interested in this report 3 years after the fire? Well, the Antico fire happened in 2017, but investigators didn't realize until 2019, when they had the McLaughlin fire, that they were dealing with a serial arsonist that was active in multiple counties. You see, after the McLaughlin fire, that was where police had video of the arsonist and they sent it out to other counties and jurisdictions. That's when they realized in Montgomery County that they were looking for the same guy. And if they're looking for a guy that's active in 2 counties, he's probably active in more counties. And so they formed a multi-county task force. They began looking for other fires that had the same MO. And when they identified the Antico fire as a possibility, they asked for that report. That was when it came to everyone's attention that this report had never been finished. And it was now 3 years after the fire. This new investigator reviewed the initial report with the initial intention of saying, yes, I agree with the findings, or no, I don't. And he came up with a completely different interpretation of the findings. Now, I'm not going to go through every single point he made, but it really came down to the front and outside of the garage door. When the new investigator reviewed the photos of the outlet and the garage door motor, he saw that he didn't see any evidence that would have suggested that the type of damage seen in the photos he was reviewing matched what he would expect to see if there was an electrical fire. So no evidence of arcing, melted insulators. In fact, in court, he called the garage door opener pristine, which means that, to me, it may have been covered in soot and smoke, but didn't show evidence that it had been the ignition point for the fire.
Right, it wasn't involved. Oh, it was involved, but it wasn't involved as an ignition.
Right. So one of the things the investigator also found anomalous was the size and shape of V patterns. Now, V patterns are a pattern of charring and smoke, and in many cases, a V pattern on a wall can actually point to the origin of the fire. Now, this isn't always true, and I put out a couple videos about this, but in this case, there is a larger V pattern on the exterior of the garage door and a smaller V pattern on the inside of the garage door, which indicates that the fire on the exterior of the door had been larger than the fire on the inside of the door. If the fire started in the garage, we would expect the opposite to be true. In addition, there was some rubber gasketing around the garage door, and the melting pattern of the rubber indicated that the fire had to have begun outside. He indicated that as he looked at photos taken after the fire was extinguished, after the fire department had put out the fire, there was areas that were still wet from firefighting activities, but there was 2 large dry spots on the concrete where the water had dried faster than the areas around it, and to him this indicated that those areas of concrete were hotter than the surrounding areas, which caused the water to evaporate and dry faster. Now, I can agree with him on this point if this was caused by radiant heating. However, When we pour a flammable liquid onto a surface like concrete, we actually notice that the area under the flammable liquid is actually partially insulated. So we end up with these donut-shaped burn patterns where we get burn patterns around the exterior, and then it's not until the flammable liquid completely burns away that we start to see the middle area burn, so we get a donut pattern.
There's a lot more space and air gap in concrete than people might suspect.
Right, but the thing to remember is that in a flammable liquid fire, the vapors that come off the top of the liquid are what's burning. So the fire's above the liquid and heat rises.
It's really the oxygen above it burning and the vapors from the fuel feeding it?
No, it's the vapors are feeding it, but it has to be the right vapor-oxygen mixture. It has to be within that flammable range for that fuel. But
yeah, I just explained fuel wrong.
That's okay. But because of this, and because heat rises, usually the area in the center of a pool fire below the pool is actually an area that doesn't heat up as much as the areas around it. But if the garage door was on fire, and again, I couldn't see these photos, so if the garage door was on fire, the radiant heat from the garage door could have heated those areas outside of the garage more than other areas around it, which could explain that drying pattern.
You're like a less weird Smecker from Boondock Saints.
I'm going to
for fire.
take that as a compliment.
It is a compliment.
So after the second investigator reviewed all of the photos, re-interviewed everybody, read all the old interview reports, he ruled this fire incendiary. Now, if we consider that the first investigator was influenced by his bias and the assumption that the fire is accidental, we could also suggest that maybe the second investigator was biased by the fact that he probably now knows that there's a potential serial arsonist in this case may be involved in it. So I want to just mention that out of fairness. However, in hearing this investigator testify, I felt like he really did find some things that can only be explainable by the theory that the arson was started on the outside of the garage doors. And this surely could be my own bias, because I'm a fire nerd. But I will say that this particular witness testified for an inordinately long time in such excruciating detail that I was bored, and I love this stuff. So he was very thorough, very detailed, and I kind of wanted him to just go faster and get on with it, but whatever. Even if I'm biased, even if the investigator's biased, even if the entire world is biased against Crawford at this point, I think the nail in the bias coffin was actually put there by Crawford himself. Because when they served the search warrant at Crawford's home, they found the list, obviously with Cairo on it, seeming to represent the Antico family, but that's not all they found. True to his style, Crawford had repeatedly searched for the Anticos on Spokeo and Facebook.
No.
Yeah. So let's review what we have so far and in the order that it occurred, because we've gone through these fires out of order for the narrative. But I'm going to put it in order, and I'm going to tell you what they found in the search warrant related to each fire in a quick summary, just to help us get it all.
This episode should be brought to you by some kind of VPN. You think what you're doing on your phone is private? You think when you make a list of people you want to assault on your phone and then geotag all your ideas for mayhem, you think that's a good idea? No, you need a VPN.
You know what's funny is that the judge actually interrupted testimony from the forensics expert to ask how to turn off all the geotagging on his phone.
No way.
He did. He goes, like, the guy paused in a sentence and the judge goes,
We're open for a VPN spot right here.
And the judge is like, how do you turn that off? It was hilarious.
I can't believe that's not a VPN meme.
So anyway, let's review the fires and in the order that they occurred. So the first fire, May 28th, 2011. This was the Martin Fleming fire where 2 cars were set on fire in the driveway. The video surveillance shows a silver 4-door sedan suspected of being the arsonists, and a suspect in a hooded sweatshirt with the hood cinched around his face. The suspect set 2 cars on fire, his pants and a shoe, which he left on the scene. He reportedly left in only 1 shoe with no pants. Investigators find the singed jeans in a storm drain and the single Nike Monarch shoe in the street.
I got 1 shoe and no pants, and now I'm gonna do my dance.
So forensics experts later found Facebook photos of the defendant wearing black Nike Monarch shoes. And the defendant wears a size 10 shoe, which matches what they found at the scene. 17 days after that fire, the defendant made a posting on a medical board claiming that he had burns on his legs that he had sustained 2 weeks prior and wanted to know how long he could expect the pain to last. He made this post using his actual own email address that he used all the time.
No f***ing way.
And when the police arrested him and photographed his legs, he had burns consistent with the type of burns one would expect if one set one's legs on fire.
No one could have asked this question in episode 1 of this case.
On September 5th, 2016, so this was 5 years later, at 5:30 in the morning, this is when the first fire occurred at Justin and Miriam Scherstrom's home. The cameras they didn't pick up the fire, but they picked up the sound of pouring liquid, the clicking of a lighter, and this corresponds to the entry on the list that says Justin 3, because Justin had 3 fires. March 5th, so about 6 months later, this was the fire at Erica Burns' house. This was the fire that was noted as white privilege on the list. They found correspondence between Mary and the coordinators of the CASA program about their issues from when she attended that training, and there were searches for Mrs. Burns' address on Crawford's computer. So these first 3 fires we just talked about, the first one was in 2011, then there's a huge break, and we go to 2016 and 2017. And we're going to talk about more fires possibly that could go in that gap. All right, so that was in March of 2017. And then just a couple months later in June 23rd of 2017, at 4:19 a.m., this was the Antico fire that we covered today. Now, forensics experts found Spokio searches for Russell Antico, numerous Facebook searches for Russell and Veronica Antico, and Google Map searches for their address 6 days before the fire. And 1 day after the fire, numerous Facebook searches for Russell and Veronica Antico. It appeared that the suspect was possibly looking for news of the fire because none of the local news channels had covered it. His Apple Health data shows that he was active at 2:57 a.m.
Whoa, why do you know that? Why do you know this guy's Apple Health data?
Because it was part of the warrant that was seized by police.
These guys get a warrant for your Apple Watch?
Yep. It's the same as a cell phone.
Hey man, I don't know how any of this works. It's shocking to me.
That's why I don't have an Apple Watch.
Why? Could you commit crimes?
That's all the time.
I can't stop you. I'm like, hogtie this lady. She's so angry and burning things.
I would be the worst criminal ever.
Yeah, you would. And you'd be the most boring ever. You'd have like 2 hours of backstory for a... Ugh.
I would be a terrible criminal. So, his Apple Health data shows that he was active at 2:57 and then again at 3:03 in the morning. The fire occurred at 4:19, so this shows that he was definitely up and active before the fire occurred. Now, I had some confusion about the Apple Health data, but we'll talk about it at the end because not everybody's going to be interested in it. But then September 29th, 2017, so just another couple months later, at 3:19 in the morning, this is the second fire that self-extinguished at Justin and Miriam Scherstrom's home. The video surveillance shows the suspect in a hooded sweatshirt with the hood pulled tight, with dark pants and dark shoes. He was wearing gloves and carrying a 1-gallon jug. Investigators hear exactly the same things that they heard in the first fire with the pouring out of the liquid, the clicks of the lighter. And then the suspect is seen leaving the scene and they catch a 4-door silver sedan. Apple Health data shows that Crawford was up and moving around at 1:42 a.m. And then again at 4:08 a.m., an investigator said that given the distance from Crawford's home to the suspect's house, it means that he probably logged his movement before he left. He left, went and committed the crime, came home, and then it started logging his movements again. As in, he didn't have his Apple Health data tracking him while he was there.
That sounds like a really considerate fire, though. Self-extinguishing.
It did self-extinguish, yeah. And again, on Crawford's list was Justin 3, and he had 3 fires. A week prior to this fire, the suspect had searches on his computer looking for directions from the suspect's house directly to the address where the fire occurred, and several other Google searches on the street that the fire was on. He's already been there once. I guess he just has a bad memory.
Or that was just a warm-up.
3 months later, December 9th, 2017, this was the date of a fire that we haven't covered yet, so we're going to be covering this one on the next episode. And then April 3rd, 2018, so what is that, 5 months later, at 3:41 a.m., this was the fire at Bud Price's house in Frederick County. And in his computer were Google searches mapping the route from his home to Bud Price's home, and Apple Health data showing that he was up and moving around at 00:39 that morning, so 12:39 a.m. He also messaged the victim asking for photos using Facebook the morning of the fire. August 17th, 2018. This was the date of another suspicious event that occurred at the same house that we're going to cover in our next episode. And then September 22nd, 2018 is the second fire at the same home that we're going to be covering in the next episode. March 3rd, 2019, this was the Alfonso Hawkins fire that we discussed today. It happened at 3:54 a.m. Crawford's computer included searches for the name Alfonso Hawkins and for the address of the fire. He was also found to have searched Charles County Fire Department and Southern Maryland Newsnet for articles about the fire. He searched the Department of Tax Assessors website they believe that he searched it in order to research names and addresses because it can be used for that purpose. March 16th, 2019 at 03:30. This is the Richard McLaughlin fire where the dog woke him up and he found his 2 cars and garage on fire. His garage door was covered with accelerant, and the arsonist left a trailer of accelerant down between the 2 vehicles, causing both cars and the garage to burn, and the fire did extend to parts of the house. In this one, we do have video. The suspect was wearing a hoodie with the hood drawn tight, black shoes. The suspect was carrying 2 one-gallon containers, which he poured out on the cars and the garage, and a silver 4-door vehicle was seen leaving the scene. They found in Crawford's computer search a PowerPoint presentation that he made all about Richard McLaughlin, including screenshots of the internet searches he'd done of the victim's address, photos of the house, tax records, and all kinds of other personal information and internet searches on the victim.
Whoa, hold on. Did you just say that who made that?
David Crawford.
Crawford made
a PowerPoint presentation about Richard McLaughlin.
So, along with the phone list, he also took it upon himself to make a whole PowerPoint presentation.
And that's not all. Wait till I read you the next sentence.
He sold it to Hollywood, and Tom Cruise played him.
The suspect had put a calendar entry in his cell phone titled McLaughlin Fire on the date of the fire.
What the actual hell? What?
Yeah, I'm not kidding.
Hey, dude. Man, I get that if you're a criminal, you're probably not super smart, or you super are, no one's ever heard of you, right? I'm going to ask the obvious question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you make a PowerPoint presentation just for yourself to watch later, or do you intend to share that with somebody else for the purpose of expanding knowledge?
I have used PowerPoint presentations to document meeting notes so I could put photos in it easier, because it's just easier to put photos in PowerPoint than in Word. But, I mean, I don't know what other people do. That's just how I do it.
So you made some PowerPoint stuff and never intended to send it to anybody else, just for your own. I don't make PowerPoint stuff because I'm not a nerd.
I am, though. Are you ready for more? Because there's more. All right. They also found searches for the victim's name, and just after the fire, at about 4:30 a.m., the defendant downloaded a police fire and rescue scanner app as though he was trying to listen to see if anyone was responding to the fire.
Was this before they switched onto the higher frequencies?
I don't know. This was in 2019.
Because you used to just be able to listen to that stuff on like a regular little scanner, and now you got to have it to be in a different frequency. I think they went to like an ultra high frequency or something.
I don't know. And then the defendant's Apple Health recorded the victim was awake and moving around in the time after the fire around 4:59 a.m. Then we get to November 17th, 2020 at 3:15 a.m. This was the third fire at Justin and Miriam's home and their new house. Again, the suspect on the video was in a hooded sweatshirt pulled tight around the face, had dark shoes and dark pants. There's a silver vehicle matching the silver vehicles caught at the other scenes. Crawford used an app called Pulse Point at 7 a.m. on the morning of the fire before anyone had informed him of the fire. to search for information on fires in Montgomery County. However, Montgomery County doesn't submit their data to Pulse Point, so no data was located. So apparently he then tried searching for info on the Damascus Fire Department at the same time. I think Damascus might have been a mutual aid area to that location. Well, when Crawford looked for this data on the Pulse Point app, he could not yet have known about the fire, because this occurred at 7 a.m. the morning of the fire and nobody had notified him. GPS data from his phone revealed that Crawford was on the street where Justin and his wife lived during the third fire just 2 days before the fire at 5:30 in the morning. And his Apple Health data shows that he was up and moving around from 1:37 a.m. to 4:13 a.m., which is about the time it would take him to get from his house to Justin's, set the fire, and then get home. And I'm going to leave you today with one more nugget of information. David Mary Crawford drove a silver 2005 Toyota Camry, which matches the cars seen at multiple arson locations. And do you know what the brand SureCan is?
SureCan?
Mm-hmm.
No, but is it like Narcan?
No, it's a brand of gas can, and it has a proprietary type of nozzle.
Is it a horrible nozzle
I don't know.
You can never dispense fuel out of?
I don't think that's the intention. SureCan is a brand of gas can, and the license plate on the Camry that Crawford drove had a vanity tag that said SureCan.
No way.
Mm-hmm. Huh. So next week we are going to get into the final person on this list, which is the Evelyn 2 notation. We're going to this is going to be the most emotional. This was the most emotional testimony in court related to this fire. So this fire was much more serious. He was charged for murder, or for attempted murder, in that fire.
For the next episode, bring your tissues and MDMA. Go on an existential quest to realize the reason for your own existence, maybe.
And that is today's episode.
This shirt is loud.
It really is.
Like, I'm barely touching it.
You might have to take your shirt off to record.
Cue the wah-wah music.
Wah-wah. Boom, chicka, boom, boom.
This is serious. This is like climbing out of a tent.
Wardrobe change to record our podcast.
I just felt really naked up top.
We did say that we're appropriate for all audiences.
It's supposed to be a family show.
I've only forgotten to bleep out a few cuss words.
Oh. I wasn't trying to get his pants off. I was just trying to retrieve my vest. When I interact with just about anything, the pants fall off. I encountered a man Karen. First of all, this whole thing is entirely my fault because I made the mistake of going to Walmart after 12 p.m.
And that's the cutoff for the weird.
That's like the witching hour in the middle of the day for Walmart. I pulled into one and I split myself right in the middle of the lines. Just perfectly. I thought about taking a picture of it because it was really nice. Well, but that was in retrospect. Like, I didn't come into the situation thinking. So I pull into the parking spot. There's not very much room there because even though I'm parked perfectly, he's got wheels over the line a little bit, so it's like 8 inches away. He decides to go to the passenger side. I've got the tinted windows, and he looks into my truck like he's looking for something. But I still had my power on the truck. It was like the engine was off, but the power was still on, so I rolled the window down. I was like, "What are you looking for, man?" It looked like he peed a little bit. He's like, "No, I'll just wait for you to go." I'm like, "But I've just arrived." I'm not leaving. I wasn't trying to start. I was just trying to get some beers and a dog log and some freezer pizzas. I just wanted to do that and leave. Well, if it doesn't sound like several pounds of dog bologna. They smell like bacon. Sell your cult leader. And I scare the common man.
That sounds ridiculous.
Yeah. Yep. I was letting you hear it.
You could be the Walmart parking police.
And I swear, if you don't pick up your cart, I will follow you home. I come out in the Batman costume I just bought for $19.95. Hey, I think it's you that's parked close to me, and not the other way around. Why don't you just back off and let your wife drive you home? I'm the only one who exists. You're a figment of my imagination, pal.
All out of love, I'm so lost without you.
Did you... Was that air supply? Because I felt like someone took mine away.
Oh, this thing told me I wasn't human.
You want to be married for 10 years and then get friend-zoned.
No.
I don't want to go out like this. Oh, I feel like a fool. Is that really my inventory of skeleton parts? And this little sea cow is making little sea cow noises. And I was like, oh, buddy, that's so cute. You're like, it's like you're saying thank you. You know, he's saying thanks, man. I hate being in this net. Thanks for letting me out, pal. I don't think this was really happening, though. I think that was some kind of distress call, in retrospect. Because what I saw next, off my starboard side, was a wall of mammal flesh arising from the sea. And I was dire afraid. That was the closest I've ever come to running on water, and it really probably looked like I damn near was. Monster! And I'm married to a beige throw pillow. And I am a moist banana. I'm something you can use. Hi. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm something you can use. I know I don't look useful. But I assure you, I'm something you can use.
All right, so let's get down to business. It took every ounce of self-control not to go boom chicka boom boom after I said that.
I was wondering if you were wearing your business socks.
Let's get down to business.
Oh, yeah.
Once... We're doing great so far.
I didn't park too close to you.
Maybe that's the problem. Until you blow a gasket.
You just winced before I said that, like you were
I was expecting something terrible.
You were preparing for an impact. Well, you're gonna need a lot of lube for that.
I don't have that much. I don't have a lube budget that big.
Regular people don't have that much lube on hand.
Or on any part of their body.
I'll on every vehicle I feel like on. You can't stop me.
All right.
At some point, I'm going to be incontinent and I'm going to lose my pants.
That brings our tally up to 9 fires. So let's go ahead and plow ahead to fire number 10, shall we?
I'm all about plowing ahead.
Rebecca. Nope. Damn it, I did it again.
Oops, I did it again. I f***ed up my line.
There were...
Oops, I did it for another sequel. Mother knew I would.
Fire that occurred at Erica Burns' house of the car of her mother in the driveway. That's a lot of prepositional phrases.
I was having a real hard time figuring out where that originated.
Of the car of her mother in her driveway with the gasoline.
Wait, what's the back? Wait,
it's like a clue game gone wrong. You don't remember this?
What?
Okay. Backing up to last week.
Yeah.
So, chiropractor team. That made a lot of noise.
Sorry. That was a husband and wife, what?
The other... I literally have not gotten... We've been working on this paragraph for so long. I'm not even past the second sentence.
I have notes.
All right. I say Antico.
I'm pretty sure you spent a considerable amount of time in an alternate dimension. You vexed everyone you've ever come in contact with.
I guess I'm just vexing. I'm known to be a little vexing.
Like a burrito wrapped in another burrito.
And bacon.
I'm surprised I didn't fall
And then it
asleep.
auto-played Howard the Duck. Ugh.
No way.
Yes. Way.
Wow, I haven't seen that in a minute.
You were sleeping on the remote and I couldn't turn it off. I endured Howard the Duck instead of waking you up. You're welcome. All right, are we done? My butt's asleep too.
I'm dying.